Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started very shortly. As you'll see, we're now recording the session for use by BSK and Childhaven. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will get started in just about 1 minute. All right, it is now 10 a.m. and we are very happy to see you all here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Building a New Normal in Primary Care for Families with Young Children. Today, our presenters will be discussing how and why Family Navigators provide culturally specific developmental screening and promotion in pediatric primary care settings. This project is a unique collaboration between Childhaven, Odessa Brown Children's Clinic, and Harborview Pediatrics that brings together the traditionally siloed fields of primary care and early learning by embedding developmental specialists into pediatric clinics. I'm Rachel Dumanian, and as Childhaven's Early Childhood Healthcare Integration Manager, I have the honor of working alongside today's three presenters who you will hear and see on camera as they speak. Fernanda Martinez Novoa, a Family Navigator lead at Harborview Pediatric Clinic. Dr. Kathy Park, a pediatrician at Odessa Brown Children's Clinic. And Brisa Martinez Lucero, a parent of 2 children who receive care at Harborview Pediatrics, and a member of the Family Navigator Parent Partners Advisory Group. Additional team members supporting this presentation are Yusuf Hayi and Jamila Jenkins, our brand new primary care early childhood specialists who began doing this Family Navigator work at Odessa Brown Children's Clinic just earlier this month. John Gould, Childhaven's Community Impact and Community Relations and Government Relations Officer, and Olivia Alfaro and Austin Babineau, our interpretation team from Atlas Language Services. Throughout our session today, Olivia is providing simultaneous English to Spanish interpretation to Brisa, and when Brisa shares with all of us, we will hear her speak in Spanish, followed by consecutive English interpretation. Now, let's take a few moments to learn about who else we're here in community with for the next hour. If you haven't already taken the poll that was presented to you when you entered, please take a quick moment to do it now. You will find the word polls on the Whova app. It's to the right of the Q&A on the computer screen, and it should also be visible on your mobile app. Click the question, which of the following describe you? And select all of the options that apply. Then click submit. You'll now see the poll results showing who is in our community. It's so exciting to get to be among youth and educators, parents, and healthcare providers. If you selected none of the above, we invite you to drop your role into the Whova chat. I'm going to pause for about 30 seconds now so we can appreciate the diversity of who is here today. Please direct your attention to the chat. Thank you. We love your participation. We're so glad you're here with us. Here's what we're going to be doing together today. We'll start with a visioning exercise that we will all participate in. We will then explore current barriers to quality early childhood care and children's success, as well as the ways that the Family Navigator program, funded by Best Starts for Kids, addresses these barriers. We'll present research, share personal stories, and invite you to participate in interactive activities. Before we begin, I want to mention a few logistics. Everyone who joined this meeting was automatically muted. To minimize background noise, we ask that you stay muted, but we welcome you on camera or off, depending on your preference. Our chat monitor, Jamila, will be responding to comments and logistical questions in the Whova chat that you just used. If you have questions for the presenters, please put them in the Whova Q&A, just next to the chat. If we do not have time during the session to answer your questions, we look forward to engaging with you following the event, and we commit to responding to your question within 1 week. Whova will save your questions and enable us to do this follow-up. So again, please post your questions in the Whova Q&A. Finally, BSK has asked that we share this code word with you. Jamila, are you ready with that code word?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. And our secret code word today is happy.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Kathy Park to get us started.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. You guys are all little black boxes on my screen, but I am really thrilled that you guys are all here. I'm really happy to be in this space with you guys. I am a pediatrician. I work at the Odessa Brown Children's Clinic, and I've worked there for almost 2 decades now. Our clinic is located in Seattle's central area, and we serve a diverse patient population from a vast geographic area throughout King County, predominantly in South Seattle and South King County. So in my practice, I have the great privilege of seeing kids through really a spectrum of ages, from birth to toddlers, to school-age kids, to teens and young adults. But I will let you in on a secret that one of my most favorite visits is still that first newborn check. So to get us started today, we are going to do an interactive activity that I like to do sometimes with families at their baby's first clinic visit. So we're gonna get our brains clicking. So pull up to your keyboards, everyone. Okay, so take a look at this baby on the screen. Imagine that you are holding this beautiful baby safe in your arms. This might be your newborn daughter, your son, your grandchild, your neighbor's new baby. You're gazing into this face and your heart is bursting. My question for your consideration is, what are the gifts or qualities you would like to give this baby by the time they graduate from high school?
To respond to Kathy's question, please go to mentee.com and enter the code on the screen. I've put the link and the code in the chat. Please take a moment to click the link in the chat and copy the code. Now paste the code in the box under please enter the code. The code is 33901344. That's 33901344. You will now see a page with this beautiful baby that says, what are the gifts or qualities you would like to give this baby by the time they graduate from high school? Please take a few moments to add your responses in the box that says enter a word, then click submit. When it's received, it will read, thanks, we received your input, add another above if you want, and you can submit unlimited responses. When you're done, don't close Mentee, just come back to the presentation shared screen. I'll give you a few moments to enter your gifts and qualities for this baby. We'll give you about 10 more seconds to enter any final gifts. Thank you for your submissions.
Okay, Rachel, are we ready to move on, do you think? Okay. Okay, let's take a look at the gifts that we want to give the newborns in our lives. So anytime that multiple people said the same word, it's going to show up in a bigger size. So I'm seeing resilience, love, confidence, empathy, support, a sense of self, self-esteem, safety, joy, security, compassion, spiritual health, happiness, and agency, and just so many other amazing gifts. So I'm just overwhelmed by this. This is just thinking about a world where all children are able to realize these gifts. Let's just sit in this space and just try to read more of these gifts, because it feels really good to be here. And we live in a world where kids don't always get to enjoy these gifts. So let's move on and collectively consider our next question. What are the challenges to giving children these gifts?
You now return to Mentee, or if you've just joined us, go to mentee.com and enter the code that's in the chat. You now go there, you'll be able to access the new question. What are the barriers to giving children these beautiful gifts that are on the screen? Take a few more moments to add any other barriers to giving children these gifts.
Okay, Rachel, let's take a look. Can we take a look at what challenges? Okay, what are the barriers to giving children these gifts? Okay, I'm seeing poverty, racism, Facebook, social media, misunderstanding, trauma, mental health struggles, financial resources, not enough time, family support, lack of accessibility, inequities, misunderstandings, and lots more. Give us just a couple seconds more to take these in. So these are big, right? These are big barriers and challenges. So the story we'd like to share with you all today is about a Family Navigator program within 2 pediatric primary care settings. And like the work you all are doing, this project aims to build upon the strengths of families, to give families the tools to navigate complicated systems, and to ensure linkages to services that will set children on a trajectory of success and well-being. We believe this work is the counterweight to the barriers and challenges families are facing. It allows our children to start out on a path to reach their fullest potentials, to thrive in a world that may not always be on their side. So to bring this story to life, we are so lucky to have Brisa Martinez Lucero with us today. Brisa is the mother of 2 beautiful children, and she's going to share with us the gifts she wants to give her children and what barriers she's encountered.
Hola, mi nombre es Brisa. ¿Qué regalos me gustaría darle a mis hijos? Es
Well,
pasar
hello, my name is
con
Brisa, and what gifts I would like to give my children?
jugar, demostrarles amor, apoyarlos, motivarlos a ser mejores, educación, salud, buen cuidado, prepararlos para el futuro.
So, spending time with them, playing with them, showing them love, supporting them, motivating them to be better, education, health, good care, preparing them for the future.
Enseñarles valores y que sean fuertes ante las adversidades.
Teaching them values and making them strong to face adversity.
Barreras que existen para darle esos regalos a sus hijos. Los padres pueden proveer mucho de estas cosas en casa y gratis, pero hay cosas que salen de las manos de los padres.
Well, barriers to giving these gifts to our children. Well, parents can provide many of these things at home for free, but some things are out of the parents' hands.
Algunos padres trabajan y no pueden dedicarles tiempo a sus hijos. El dinero es otra barrera para poder acceder a servicios como educación superior y de calidad.
Well, some parents work and cannot devote time to their children. Money is another barrier to accessing services such as quality education or higher education.
Otra barrera es la falta de conocimiento que los padres tienen sobre el desarrollo de sus hijos y las maneras de apoyarlos.
Another barrier is the lack of knowledge that parents have about their children's development and ways to support them.
Thank you, Brisa, so much for that wonderful example of the gifts many parents wish for their children and the worries that parents have about being able to provide them. So early childhood is this critical window of opportunity for promoting developmental and social emotional health, which has significant implications on long-term wellness. And I know I am speaking to the choir because I know all of you guys know this, and this is why you're doing this work. These early relationships and interactions shape the architecture of the brain that affects sensory, language, and cognitive development. So this early development and this literal brain building sets the stage for kindergarten readiness. And we care about kindergarten readiness because success in kindergarten is highly correlated with lots of positive outcomes in education, employment, home ownership, criminal justice, substance use, and mental health into adulthood. Pediatric primary care, like where I work, is a place with many touchstones with young children and families, and is a promising resource for driving developmental health interventions. Next slide. So what might that look like in primary care? Well, it starts with the actual needing to do the developmental screening of young children. So we know that approximately 12 to 15% of children experience developmental delays or disabilities, and that early identification is critical to optimize language, cognitive, motor, and social emotional development. It's estimated that only about half of the children with developmental concerns are even detected before they enter school. And only 10% of children with delays are identified and actually receive intervention. Research shows that racial and language disparities also exist in the diagnosis of developmental and behavioral conditions, as well as the actual receipt of those early intervention services. And compared with children living in an English primary language household, those in non-English parent language households are 40% less likely to have received screening in the past year. Next slide. Okay, so we know that development in early childhood is critical. We know that screening can identify kids who need interventions and supports. And we know that kids see their primary care provider many times during this critical window. So the answer kind of seems like a no-brainer, right? Like we should just screen the young children we see in clinic and refer those who need early intervention. Well, let's dive a little bit deeper into understanding why this hasn't been effective. So this is the ASQ, the Ages and Stages questionnaire. It's a common screening tool, which many of us are familiar with. And I am going to ask you to consider the following scenario. You are waiting in the waiting room. You've been waiting there for maybe 15 minutes. You're brought into an exam room with your child. Maybe you have multiple children with you. And you're handed this form by an unfamiliar staff member. What thoughts and reactions might you have if you were handed this screening tool during your child's well-child checkup? And how might you feel if you were not a native English speaker? And I am hoping that you all can put your thoughts and reactions in the Whova chat. Rachel, is that correct?
Yes. Please put your thoughts or feelings, reactions to this screening in the Whova chat. I'm going to flip through the next few pages to show you what this screening looks like. How might you feel if you were handed this when you entered the doctor's office? I'm going to go back through it one more time, a little more slowly. You seem confused. This looks long and complicated, overwhelmed, skeptical, worried about having to write in long form responses. This is a lot to fill out. Disregarded, writing this down. What does this have to do with my child? Dismissive, this might not matter. Overwhelming, hard to fill out with a wiggly child. This looks long and time consuming. How do I do this with my kid sitting here? How do I keep them engaged and happy? Defensive. Afraid.
All of those things that you guys have said are what our families feel. Next slide, Rachel. Let me try to move a little quicker. All of those things these are some of the barriers you guys have talked about and put in the chat. These are some specific examples from questions. And I'll just let you read through that. Some of these questions, like the pat a cake questions, is just some of our families I don't even know what that game is. I don't even really know what that game is. I don't know if that's like you're patting something down or you're patting your hand. So it's difficult to understand. Literacy levels of some of these tools are written at the 8th grade level or higher. And some questions are just very specific and it's not natural to think about your child doing these things in those terms. Next slide. And lots of you touched on these themes as well. When screening happens out of context and without any support, people feel, like you guys named, defensive and intimidated. We may not get the results that we think we're getting. We may even be causing harm to the relationship between provider and families. As you guys noted, families might not understand why they're being asked these questions. They might feel a certain obligation to answer in a certain way. The questions might feel too sensitive, intrusive. Families might not want to answer accurately out of fear, and stigma may exist around developmental or behavioral problems. And even when translation is provided, it might be from a distant phone interpreter and an unfamiliar staff person and people who just don't have knowledge of the tool or any relationship with families. Okay, next slide. And then lastly, you guys also touched on some of these barriers as well. This happens even after the screening. So even if you can get through the screening, even if we've identified a child that has problems, and we refer them for early intervention services, then what happens? And unfortunately, there's just still so many barriers that exist for families. And I will tell you very briefly about one of my patients, Kaylee. Kaylee is now almost 4. She was born to her mom, Aaliyah, who struggled with substance use and abuse. And the baby was actually discharged into the care of her grandmother after being born. Kaylee walked at 11 months. She had a few words. By a year, she could turn a single page in a board book, and she enjoyed shared experiences with her grandmother. But by 2.5 years old, she had a few more words, but she was not putting 2 words together or saying any phrases, having a lot of tantrums, and just caregivers having a really hard time managing her behavior. Aaliyah had completed her rehab program and they were reunited at this point. So Kaylee was referred for full developmental evaluation, but months go by. Kaylee's not seen in clinic again until she's 3. Aaliyah reports now that she just never got a call from the early intervention program. And she's really frustrated because it's getting harder and harder to handle Kaylee. She's disruptive, she's oppositional, she has big feelings. She's been hitting and biting kids in her daycare. So she's again referred for services, and now she's 3 and she goes through Child Find. A social worker helps her to connect to a local school district, but it's the summertime, so they're not doing evaluations for a few months. When an evaluation date is set, Aaliyah misses it because her transportation falls through that day. So Kaylee's now been kicked out of her daycare, and Aaliyah is overwhelmed, stressed, and just really frustrated. So this is just not, this is for an English speaking family, and it is not an uncommon story at all. It really illustrates the very many failures, system failures and barriers to receiving services. Thankfully, we do have innovative people and community-based organizations to help support families. And I'm thrilled now to hand off to a person who so creatively works with families to overcome these barriers. Fernanda.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Fernanda Martinez Novoa. I'm a Childhaven employee working at the Harborview Pediatric Clinic, and my role is Family Navigator Lead. This program was created as a response to the barriers that families have and that Kathy just mentioned when they are trying to access to screening and developmental services. We have served more than 700 children in 33 languages, and our work is based on these three approaches that I'm going to be explaining with more detail. The first approach is linguistically and culturally adapted screening and early identification. The second one is culturally responsive developmental promotion. And the third approach is ongoing relationships and case management. Next. The first approach includes a culturally and linguistically adapted tool that is the SWYC, the Survey of Well-Being of the Child, of young children. And the team at Harborview chose this screening because first, it's shorter than others, so it's only 10 questions about milestones, not 36 like the ASQ. It is very comprehensive, so we are not only screening about milestones, but we also have questions related to family stressors, such food insecurity, parental depression, domestic violence. And there's a screening about the mental health, behavioral screening for children. And other questions that we ask here is about how many days a week do you read books to your child, and if the parent have concerns. Another reasons why they chose this tool is because it is translated to multiple languages and it considers cultural differences. Next. This is just an example of the adaptations of SWYC to Somali, and this is the cultural differences that it considers that I was trying to show. So things like using doll instead of toy, because there's no word for toy in Somali. So if you come and try to translate that, it doesn't make sense. Or things like changing two words sentence for another one that makes more sense in Somali are some of the changes that we can see. In Somali, is not a common sentence saying something like more water. It's more probably that the child will say, give me more milk. And it sounds like 3 words in English, but it's 2 words in Somali. My colleague Farhio speaks Somali and I speak Spanish. However, we administer the assessment to all families, regardless of the language, and we use interpreter services for that. The way that we help the families to complete this is we go through the question with them in a conversational way. And we ask them if these questions make sense in their language or culture. So for example, when I ask, there's a question that is asking about plurals, and the question is asking if the child can use feet for many or foot for one. So I asked the parent if they use plurals in their language. And in many languages, they don't have different words for singular and plural. So that is something important to consider. Next. The second approach is having an expert to help parents to understand the meaning of the question. For example, there's one question in the screening tool that asks if a child can name 5 objects. At first, most parents say yes. And when I ask like follow-up questions like, okay, can you give me an example of some of the objects that your child can name? Sometimes parents say things like, oh, you know, he can anything. He can say anything that he sees around. So I said, like, do you mean he points? And they're like, yeah, he shows me what he wants. So the child doesn't actually verbalize the name of the object. But for parents, it sounds like it's the same. This shows the difference between identifying and verbalizing, and that is an important distinction in child development. We also explain what options like somewhat might look for in a specific question. So for the milestones, the parents can say not yet, somewhat, and very much. And sometimes they ask, what does somewhat mean in this specific question? We educate parents about milestones of their children, milestone and expectations for their children. And we use, for education, we use an evidence-based curriculum that is called Promoting First Relationships. We also use room flashcards that share simple activities that parents can do at home with their children, maybe when they are in the car or when they are getting children dressed. So things like naming parts of the body or singing or things like that that promote child development. And we promote early childhood programs such Early Head Start and Head Start. Another advantage of having an expert in the room is that we help the parents to reflect of their child skills. Some parents start by telling you, once you get in the room, you said, you know, I'm going to be asking you these questions about your child development. They start by telling you, my child does everything because he's very smart, without even listening to the questions. And this is the kind of parent that will mark very much for every question, not even taking the time to reflect about how much his child does that. So let me share a short story about this. This mom came to the clinic and she completed the form in the room with no support, just by herself, because the family navigators we were in with other patients at that time. Some minutes later, I came in the room and I asked her to review it together. And for at least 4 out of 10 questions, she had a different answer. Some questions she had said very much, and not she said somewhat. Some of them she said somewhat, not she said not yet. So when I asked her why you change your responses? Like, what is the reason? You have different options before I asked you. She said, well, I understood some of the questions in a different way. But also I felt like when you were asking me the questions, I had like more time to reflect on my child's skills. So the dialogue and our relationship produce a more accurate screening and enhance the parent understanding of child development. Next. Our third approach is ongoing relationships and a very close case management. I try to stick with families through the time as much as I can. Just as they come to the clinic and they have a primary care pediatrician, I try to see the families and their children for every wellness to be able to build relationships based on trust. Once the family has seen me twice, they are excited to tell me all the new things that the child is doing and share also some concerns like, I've noticed my child is not doing this yet. If either we at the clinic, so the pediatrician or the family navigators have concerns or the parent have concerns, we help the parents to connect with developmental services. We provide support for every step of the process. So we help them navigate in the system. We act as liaisons with agencies and school districts. We support families in overcoming barriers. And we also advocate for families and their children as much as they need to make sure that they have access to the services that their children need. Brisa has been a Harborview family for a long time, so she's going to tell us more about her experience before and after the Family Navigator program.
Es muy diferente tener una persona especialista en desarrollo infantil haciendo las preguntas y respondiendo a inquietudes.
It is very different to have a child development specialist asking the questions and answering to your concerns.
A que a uno le dé un formulario y uno lo complete solo.
Opposed to just be given a form and you have to fill it out on your own.
Antes del programa, yo completaba un formulario, pero no sentía que había un seguimiento al respecto. Es decir, nadie me decía si los resultados eran normales.
Well, before the program, I would fill out the forms on my own, but I didn't feel that there was a follow-up on it. And what I mean is no one would tell me if the results were normal.
O qué cosas le faltaban a mi niño por hacer y tampoco había una persona para hacerle preguntas.
Or what my child was missing on what he should be doing or she should be doing. And there was also no one to ask questions.
A mí me daba vergüenza preguntar acerca del tema porque soy tímida y no hablo inglés.
I was embarrassed to ask about it because I am shy and because I don't speak English.
Entonces me quedaba, yo con la duda y no podía hacer más preguntas porque a veces los intérpretes no dicen lo que uno intenta decir.
And then I was left with my questions. And because sometimes I couldn't ask more because the interpreters don't always translate what we're trying to say.
Con la navegadora de familia hay una mejor comunicación porque ella habla mi mismo idioma y la comunicación es más fácil.
With the Family Navigator, there's better communication because she speaks my language and communication is easier.
Así que entiendo mejor el propósito del formulario y puedo hacer preguntas también.
So I understand the purpose of the form better and I can also ask questions.
Algunas veces si necesito comunicarme con la clínica y no me contestan o si necesito algún otro servicio y no sé cómo conseguirlo.
Sometimes when I need to contact the clinic and they don't answer, or if I need some other service and I don't know how to get it,
me comunico con Fernanda y ella me ayuda a contactar a la persona que me pueda ayudar, como por ejemplo la trabajadora social, o me da información al respecto.
or I contact Fernanda and she helps me contact the person who can help me, such as a social worker, or she'll give me the information about it.
Thank you, Brisa, for sharing your experience with us. So a central part of this program is parents' voice. That's why we have had surveys at the clinic as well as interviews for parents about this program. But we also created a family advisory board that was a great opportunity to connect with families. For this group, we were very open to recruit as many parents as want to join. And
We learned that instead of giving feedback about the program, parents were more interested in coming to these meetings to learn about child development. That gave us an idea that we might want to create a group like to educate parents out of the clinic in the future, but then we needed to create a group to get the feedback for our program. So we create a second group of only 3 parents from 3 different cultures in different languages, Spanish, Somali, and Nepalese. And we get a very valuable feedback for our program. Brisa has also participated in both of these groups, and she's going to tell us more about it.
Ser parte de los grupos de padres fue una buena experiencia.
Being part of the parents group was a good experience.
Al principio me sentía nerviosa porque era la primera vez que participaba en una reunión del desarrollo de mis hijos.
Well, at first I was nervous because it was the first time I was participating in a meeting about my children's development.
Pero después fui aprendiendo acerca del tema.
But then I learned more about it.
Permítame.
Hold on.
También fue un espacio para conectarme con otros padres como yo, aprender de la educación de ellos que le dan a sus hijos y de sus experiencias.
It was also a space to connect with other parents like me and learn from their children's education and their experiences.
Cuando me invitaron a ser parte de este grupo, me sentí valorada porque sentí que estaban interesados en aprender sobre la educación y desarrollo de mis hijos.
When I was invited to be part of this group, I felt valued because I felt that they were interested in learning about my children's education and development.
Y me sentí importante porque tomaron en cuenta mi opinión para mejorar el programa.
And I felt important because they took my opinion into account to improve the program.
Thank you, Brisa, for sharing. From the interviews and surveys that we've collected, 100% of the parents said they had a good experience with Family Navigators. And some of the things that they said were that they felt listened, that we listen to their needs, that we respect their decisions. And I think this is specifically about moving forward to take developmental services. We understand that not all parents are ready to take that step. And also that we explain questions in a language that they understand. On the right, you can see a graphic that shows how Family Navigator Services improve rates of early childhood evaluation. And these are the numbers for the past years. The third bar represents the first year of the Family Navigator program. And as you can see, we not only made more referrals than in previous years, but the percentage of families that got connected increased significantly. Those families that did not get connected were families that we were not able to reach at all, neither in person or by phone. they didn't come back to the clinic. So it was just out of our hands. The percentage on the top represents the number of kids that got connected with services. So it came from 41% to 58%. And after Family Navigator program, this percentage went up to 96%. Next. Well, and this is how we have been able to serve more than 700 kids in 33 different languages. We attribute the success of this program to these three approaches built on family voice. And because of the success of this program, we have expanded Family Navigator to Odessa Brown. Next.
Thanks, Fernanda. Wow. I am just still basking in the glow of all of the impactful work Fernanda described and Brisa so vividly brought to life. As you can see, having our family navigators, Fernanda, Yusuf, Jamila, as part of the team adds so much value to care. They're not extra, they're not extenders. You know, in my opinion, the navigators they're integral and they're just essential. And they have a track record of proven results. They're knocking it out of the park. So thank you all for being with us this morning. And I'm so wishing that we could be together in person, because really this was a story about connection and relationships and centering families. And if I were in the room with you today, I'd ask you how you were doing. And I'd want to hear about all the important work you're engaged in, because I know we're still missing a large group of kids. I'd want to learn how your work is moving children closer to realizing all those gifts that we wish for them. So we would love for you to consider these parting questions to envision a new normal as we all move forward in this work. How does your work, professional and or personal, break down barriers so children can access the gifts we want for them? And what barriers are there still to address? Rachel, are these going to be in the chat?
Yes, so thank you all for both being with us and for all of your participation today in the chat and in the Q&A. Please, we encourage you, we would love for you to continue submitting questions to the Q&A, and we are really eager to review and respond to them and commit to answering in Whova within a week. We'd love to keep that conversation going. We've also added the 2 questions that Kathy just posed to you. So these are in the Q&A section and they are marked for you, and they will remain accessible after the session for you to respond to. So our homework is to respond to your questions, and yours is to respond to those. How does your work, professional or personal, break down barriers so children can access the gifts we want for them? And what barriers are there still to address? Finally, we'd like to thank each of you for choosing to spend this time together and with us this morning. My email and phone number are on the screen, and I will add them to the chat. So if you would like to connect with me or any of the presenters, we would be so happy to hear from you. And finally, we'd like to end this session with a big thanks to Best Starts for Kids, Seattle-King County. We're so grateful for your support. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and we hope you learn lots and continue forward into other sessions.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and attention. We're going to end the meeting now.